Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be taking a look at homework problem 9.1, and this will be one of the videos in the series of homework walkthroughs for chapter 9 and 10 combined there. So in this problem we're going to be taking a look at some payroll information here and doing some journal entries essentially. So we're going to want to be looking at both the employee payroll entry and then also the payroll tax entry that relates solely to the employer as well. So in that effort, I made this table here, and we can just fill out based on the information provided above all of the withholdings information. When it comes to the Social Security amounts, we just multiply that percentage of 6.2 times the wages earned. So that's 3720, and then we can do 1.45 times the 60,000, or 870. And then it just tells us the FUTA and SUTA amounts to input. And so I've denoted here for you all just to highlight and make, as a reminder that when we're talking federal and state income taxes in relation to payroll, we're just solely talking about the employee component. When we're talking about Social Security and Medicare taxes, that's going to apply both to the employer and the employee, and both the employee and the employer are both going to pay the same amount. We're going to match those between both parties there. And then the FUTA and SUTA, these are unemployment tax amounts. These are just for the employer to pay, not the employee. Okay, so let's start with the employee journal entry here. We've got salaries, spell that right, and wages expense. Oh, that is not right. Expense. And that's going to be the amount of the wages, and it's a debit, just like any other expense. This is the actual amount that we paid the employees. And then the amount that we have to withhold from their paychecks are going to be all the rest of these deduction amounts here. So we have federal taxes payable, state taxes payable, Social Security taxes payable, Medicare taxes payable. Anything else? No, I think that's it. Sometimes in these journal entries or in these problems, you'll see things like retirement saving, where that you'll withhold for like a 401k or something like that, or health insurance is another one that's very common, when you are an employee. Maybe some of you or a lot of you have experience with all those types of things. But in this problem, it only tells us that we're just doing really the tax amounts here. So then we can just link in the amounts that we have noted, Social Security and Medicare. And then finally, we do have salaries and wages payable, and this payable is going to be the amount that we actually end up paying to the employees here. And essentially that's just taking the total expense amount, the amount that they have earned, but minus all of the deductions that we have to withhold, right? So we are holding these amounts. We're not giving this money, even though the employee earned it, we're not giving it to them. That's required of us by the government. So, you as the business and the employer are tasked with taking this money from the employees essentially and sending it to the government, and that's how the government gets the federal income taxes and all the rest of it. So when you file your tax return at the end of the year as a W-2 employee, the government has already received these amounts of taxes. And then if you, paid through your payroll deductions here more than you owe, that's what leads you to get a tax refund, basically, right? Or you could possibly owe more taxes too, if that's how things shake out. Okay, so that's the employee portion, and the company recognizing the salaries expense, essentially. Then we've got the employer portion here. And what the employer is going to recognize is also payroll tax expense related to the wages paid, essentially. And we'll calculate what that's going to be when we're all finished with the task here. But then we have Social Security taxes payable, Medicare taxes payable, FUTA payable. And again, the FUTA and the SUTA are only applicable to the employer, not the employee. And I'll just put our explanation in here now. So we're going to accrue employer, actually I cannot spell today, accrue employer payroll tax. So as I mentioned before, the employer has to essentially match what, all right, let me just put that in that one debit or credit there. The employer has to pay the exact same amount of Social Security and Medicare taxes that the employees do. So we'll just pull those numbers down from above because they're going to be the same. And then the FUTA and the SUTA, again, it just provides us with those amounts. And then we just add these all together. And we get $4,990. And so that's the amount that the employer has to pay in payroll taxes, you know, in addition to what the employee has to pay. So lots of taxes being paid. Not the most fun thing from a employer perspective, you know, that you get tasked with not only being the government's tax collection, you know, branch essentially of being tasked with gathering and remitting these taxes and then being audited, you know, on all the work that you're doing. But you also have to pay your own payroll taxes that are just above and beyond, you know, the task of withholding and remitting for the employee. But the good thing, at least from a job security perspective, as an accountant or someone studying accounting, is that all of this work with taxes means that there's a lot of jobs out there in, you know, calculating these things, either from a business perspective and actually doing these calculations and withholdings, or from you know, more of a government perspective of being an auditor or some type of employee in that regard to kind of make sure that the taxes are being paid. So lots of job security. Anyway, I'll say that about it. Okay, and then we're going to record our one last entry here to actually pay the employees. And so this happens after the month ends. Employee checks, fix that. Okay, spell check. So what we're saying is we accrued the expense, so we made sure that we got the expense into August for the wages earned in August, but we actually made that payable. You know, the company paid the employees in September. And so just kind of like with, you know, accounts payable or other types of payables that we studied, you know, no real difference there. We have a liability to pay the employees because they've earned that money in the month of August. But we have, you know, a week later is when we're actually making the payment. And usually that time frame is so the HR and the accounting, you know, administrative teams can do all the work that they need to do on their side and review everything and get the checks ready. And so you often have kind of a 1 week delay until checks actually are distributed. And you got to have the information into the system as well, right? So a lot of times the end of the payroll period will happen, and then that information all has to be collected and analyzed. And you know, you couldn't turn around after, like, you'd have to envision some scenario where the last employee clocks out, you know, and then all of a sudden the payroll team says, okay, now everyone's done, here's your checks. You know, that's not how it happens. You need time to analyze, run payroll, do all the different tasks associated with this stuff. And as you can tell, it's relatively complex, and this is not even scratching the surface of complexity when it comes to the different types of things that you can encounter from a payroll perspective. So there's a whole class on it if you want to take the payroll class. And yeah, but from an accounting perspective, in terms of getting rid of our payable, that's pretty easy. And that's why it usually happens a little bit later, is just because there's a lot of work that has to go into calculating all the payroll, just you know, cutting the checks and having everything ready to go out to the employees. So, all right. So hopefully that is helpful, makes sense. Again, some key highlights, you know which taxes go with, you know that the FUTA and SUTA is employer only, know that the Social Security and Medicare. Sometimes you'll hear FICA taxes is another term to kind of encompass both of these things, and those are employee and employer, etc. And when we're talking about payroll withholdings and you hear federal or state income taxes in regard to payroll type situations, know that that's going to be the employee's withholdings from their paychecks for income tax for them. So, all right, well, thanks everybody, and I'll cut this one off here, and I'll see you in the next video.